I didn't know it yet, but the moment she took my hands, my marriage was already over. Not because she said anything loud. Not because I fought back, but because for the first time in decades, someone looked at me and recognized what I'd been trained to hide. Everything before that night had taught me how to stand quietly behind my wife. Everything after it would force me to step forward. The gala was supposed to be her night. She said it at least 3 times on the drive in, smoothing her dress, checking her lipstick in the mirror as if we were heading to a photo shoot instead of a fundraiser. The new owner will be there, she said. Donors will be watching. Optics matter. I nodded. I always did. As we pulled into the valet line along the river, she added, "Let me handle introductions. Just stay in the back." The building rose above us in glass and steel, lights spilling outward like confidence. Inside, the ballroom smelled of money polish, perfume, and something floral piped through the vents. A jazz trio played near the windows. Laughter floated easily. Glasses chimed. Everything sounded important. My tux was rented. The collar at CHED. In the restroom, she noticed my hands. She grabbed my wrist lightly, like checking a watch. "They look rough," she said under her breath, pulling a small tube from her purse. "Just cover the worst of it." I looked down at the calluses, the pale scar that curved along my wrist from a job gone wrong years earlier. "These are from work," I said. She sighed. "And this is from success." I washed the cream off in the sink and watched it spiral away like it didn't matter. Like I didn't. Back in the ballroom, she placed me exactly where she always did, half a step behind her shoulder, close enough to fetch a drink, far enough to be unseen. "Stay here," she hissed as a group of executives approached. "Don't embarrass me." Stood near a marble column and listened. She laughed at familiar jokes, talked about leadership and ethics like she'd invented them. Heads nodded. Names floated past me. No one asked what I did, then the music dipped. Not loudly. Just enough, a ripple moved through the room. Conversations slowed. Phones disappeared. Heads turned. The owner had arrived. She didn't look like someone who needed approval. Simple black dress. Hair pulled back. No visible jewelry, which meant it probably was. She moved through the room shaking hands, eyes scanning. Not admiring, searching. My wife straightened and stepped forward with a smile. I knew well. The woman walked past her. I felt it before I saw it, like the air changing. Her gaze locked onto mine. 3 quiet steps closed the distance. She didn't shake my hands. She took them. Warm, steady. She didn't look at my tux. She looked at my wrist. At the scar, her eyes filled. "I've been trying to find you for nearly 3 decades. She whispered. Somebody dropped a glass, and standing there, behind the column where I'd been told to stay, I understood something clearly. This wasn't recognition. It was reckoning. For a few seconds after she spoke, no one moved. Not my wife. Not the donors. Not even the musicians, their fingers hovering uncertainly over their instruments. The woman still held my hands as if letting go might undo whatever she had just set in motion her. Grip wasn't possessive. It was steady, familiar, though. It's kind of touch you only offer when you're sure. "I think you have the wrong person," I said. Finally, the words came out quieter than I meant. She shook her head once. I don't behind her. The room exhaled all at once. Someone laughed too loudly, trying to stitch the moment back together. A waiter knelt near my feet, sweeping up broken glass. My wife stepped forward, color draining from her face, then rushing back into a practiced smile. "Price," she said brightly. "I'm Marianne. This is my husband. It's Tom. He's from Rockford." The woman finished gently, without looking away from me. Marianne froze. I felt something then like stepping into sunlight after years indoors. Seen uncomfortable but alive, the woman released my hands and nodded once as if confirming something to herself. "We'll talk," she said soon. And just like that, she was gone, absorbed back into the crowd, as if she'd never stopped the music. Restarted slightly offbeat conversations resumed in fragments. People glanced at me now, quick looks, curious ones. I hadn't changed. The tux was still rented, the scar was still there, but The room had shifted around me. Marianne turned sharply. "What was that?" she hissed, smile still fixed in place. "What did you say to her?" "Nothing," I said. She said it to me, her jaw tightened. "Go get another drink and stay back." I did, but staying back didn't feel the same anymore. Later I watched her take the stage, praising integrity and vision, her voice smooth, confident. I watched donors lean in, watched a few people glance toward me again, trying to place me in a story that had suddenly changed chapters. That night we didn't talk about it in the hotel room. She lay stiff beside me, facing the wall. The city hummed outside the window, traffic sirens, the river moving unseen below. Stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment again, and again the certainty in that woman's eyes, the way she looked past everything that usually defined me and went straight to the scar. "I've been trying to find you for nearly 3 decades. By morning, Marianne was already dressed, phone pressed to her ear, whispering sharp sentences. When she noticed me watching, she turned away. The drive back to Rockford was quiet to quiet. The silence sat between us, like a third passenger, too. Days later, my phone buzzed as I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cooling in my hands. A known number, Chicago area code Tom Keller. A woman asked. "Yes, this is Eleanor Price." I closed my eyes. She suggested a diner just off the highway, neutral quiet. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting in a vinyl booth, a chipped mug cupped in both hands. "No entourage, no assistant. You still drink it black," she said. I never stopped. She smiled, small, restrained, and for a moment I saw her younger, sitting on bleachers, laughing, a cardboard tray of nachos balanced on her knees. "You remember?" I asked. "I remember everything," she said softly. "That's the problem." She told me she'd looked for years. Letters that never reached me, calls that went unanswered. She didn't accuse, she didn't dramatize. She'd just laid the truth out carefully, like pieces she'd been holding too long. "I'm not here to change your life," she said at last. "I'm here to give you clarity." She slid a card across the table. "If you ever need help understanding paperwork," she added, "call this number." That's when I realized something else. Whatever happened at that gala wasn't the end of a mystery. It was the beginning of one, and it had already followed me home. The thing about clarity is that once it enters your life, it doesn't leave quietly. After that meeting at the diner, I tried to return to routine work. Early mornings, coffee that tasted exactly the same, but something had shifted. A question had been planted, and it kept growing. Roots. Marianne noticed. Before I said a word, "Who was that woman?" she asked one night, folding laundry with unnecessary precision. "Someone from my past," I said. She smiled without warmth. "Funny how the past shows up right when the future's on the line." I didn't respond. There was no safe way to that night. Lying awake, I thought about Eleanor's certainty, the way she hadn't asked if it was me, only how I'd been. I thought about the card in my wallet and the word she used, clarity. The next morning, I reached into the mailbox, expecting the usual stack: coupons, a bill, the local paper. Something was missing every quarter. Like clockwork, there used to be a thick envelope waiting for me. Retirement statements, pension summaries, boring, comforting. Proof that decades of early mornings and live wires were turning into something solid. Debt hadn't shown up in a while. At first I told myself everything was digital now. Marianne had said that more than once. Paperless is cleaner, Tom, but the thought wouldn't let Gucci. Followed me to job sites, sat with me at lunch, rode home in the truck like an uninvited passenger. That evening I heard Marianne on the phone as I walked in. "I know," she said softly, laughing. "He doesn't understand numbers. I'll handle it." She turned away when she saw me. Something went cold in my chest later, after she'd gone upstairs. I opened the desk drawer where we kept important paper stacks, returns, warranties, insurance forms, neatly labeled. The blue binder marked retirement was gone. "Mary," I called. She came down slowly. "Careful, what? Where's the retirement binder?" She frowned like I'd asked something silly. "Why do you need that? I've always looked at it." She waved a hand. "It's all online now. You don't need to worry." "I do," I said. Her eyes hardened for just a second before smoothing over. "You've been distracted lately." "Ever since that gala." "Let me handle this." That word again, handle. I didn't push. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling. The house creaking softly around Usit felt smaller than it used to. Next day I stopped at the credit union on my lunch break. The woman at the counter knew me. We'd gone to the same high school. She typed for a moment, frowned, then looked up. "Your mailing address was changed about 6 months ago," to where she hesitated. "A P.O. box in town." My stomach dropped. Who authorized that she glance back at the screen? Your wife, she has. Power of attorney. I stared at her. I never signed a power of attorney. She bit her lip. It's on file. I drove back to work with my hands shaking on the wheel. Every red light felt longer than the last that night. I asked Marianne to sit down. Went to the credit union. I said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Why would you do that? They said you changed the mailing address and that you have power of attorney. She sighed like I'd interrupted her day. It was just easier that way you forget things. I don't forget my own life, I said. She leaned in slightly. Tom, you're tired. You're confused. That word landed harder than anything else she'd said. Confused. I looked at her then, not the woman. I'm married, but someone. Carefully rearranging the world so I couldn't see it clearly, and for the first time I understood why Eleanor had used that word clarity, because once you start looking for it, you can't pretend not to see on dawn. I wasn't done looking yet. The strangest part wasn't discovering that something was wrong, it was realizing how carefully it had been wrapped in concern after that conversation. Marianne didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. Mesh did something far more effective. She became calm, patient, professional. The way people do when they're confident they control the narrative. Let's not make this bigger than it is, she said the next morning, pouring coffee like nothing had happened. You've been under a lot of stress. I watched her from across the table. It's the same table we'd eaten at for years, the same place where decisions had always felt mutual, until I looked closer. I want to see the paperwork, I said. She paused just long enough to calculate. Of course, she replied, but later. You're already running late. That's how it went for days later. After work tomorrow. Each delay felt reasonable on its own. Together they formed a wall. 2 nights later, she brought me a folder, thick, tabbed, organized. She slid it across the table like a teacher returning homework. See, she said gently. Everything's in order. I opened its signatures. Dates, my name, my handwriting are close enough to pass forms. I vaguely remembered signing after dinner one night, when she said they were routine updates, insurance benefits, digital delivery preferences. Buried among them was the power of attorney. I stared at it longer than the others. You said these were just updates. I said they were, she replied. You didn't ask questions. I trusted you. She smiled thinly, and I took care of things. I flipped pages faster now. Beneficiary changes, mailing preferences, everything pointed in one direction, away from Memmy. Head began to pound. Tom, she said, softly lowering her voice, you're reading too much into this at our age. Things need to be streamlined. Streamlined. Another word that sounded harmless until you felt it used against you. I want to log in, I said, right now. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. You'll only get overwhelmed. I'll try. She opened her laptop, turned it toward me. Her fingers moved quickly. Screens flashed. Numbers appeared, then vanished as she scrolled. There, she said, snapping the laptop shut. Everything's fine. That wasn't showing me, I said. She sighed. Tom, you're not thinking clearly. That word, a gank-infused. I leaned back in my chair and studied her. Not the woman who once leaned her head on my shoulder at drive-ins. Not the woman who used to laugh easily before everything became managed. I need time, I said. Of course, she replied. Immediately, just trust me. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. Every creak felt louder. Every shadow heavier. I wasn't angry. Yet he was alert. The next day I went somewhere I hadn't been in years. Public library. Sitting at a computer with bifocals perched on my nose felt ridiculous, but I called the number Eleanor had given me. The forensic accountant spoke slowly, plainly. You're not crazy, he said, and you're not alone. He explained how paperless systems worked, how easy it was to redirect information, how control often hid behind convenience. I wrote everything. Down dates, words, small changes I'd ignored. When I got home that evening, the house felt different. The desk drawers were reorganized, not messy, empty. The hallway filing cabinet had a cheap silver lock on it. What's that? I asked. Marianne didn't look up from her laptop. Privacy. It's my stuff too. She clicked her mouse. Your things are in the garage. That's when I understood this wasn't about forgetting. This was about removing my ability to see. And for the first time in my life, I stopped standing back because silence hadn't protected. MIT had trained me, and training can be undone. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee. E.T. didn't confront her again, not right away confrontation. requires leverage, and all I had at that moment was suspicions. So instead of arguing, I did something that felt unnatural after decades of standing. Bakai paid attention. I bought a small notebook at the hardware store on my way home from work. Nothing fancy, spiral-bound blue cover. I slipped it into my lunch bag like it was a guilty secret, and I started writing everything down, dates, times. Words, when she said paperless is cleaner, when she said you're tired. When she said let me handle it at work, I labeled panels and tightened lugs with the same care I always had, but my mind stayed sharp. I noticed how often she was on the phone when I walked in, how she lowered her voice, how quickly she closed her laptop. None of it dramatic. All of it deliberate. 2 days after the credit union visit, I came home to find the house rearranged again. Furniture information, the desk drawers were empty. Now completely, the filing cabinet in the hallway had a new lock on it. The cheap silver kind you buy at Menards, the kind meant to keep honest people honest. What's that? I asked. Marianne didn't look up from her screen. Privacy. It's my paperwork too. She clicked her mouse like she hadn't heard me. Your things are in the garage. I went out there and opened the old plastic tote. Manuals, warranties, light bulbs, duct tape, Christmas ornaments, a laminated church directory from 2012, no retirement binder. That night she sat on the couch flipping through a magazine like everything was normal. Tom, she said, without looking up. I talked to HR legal today. My stomach tightened. About what about you? She finally met my eyes. You've been acting strange since that gala. I waited. If you keep questioning things, it could create instability. She said it calmly. Professionally, you've had headaches. You've been working part-time lately. Benefits depend on consistency, instability, and another clean word, another threat wrapped in professionalism. You don't understand how these systems work, she added gently. I'm trying to protect us. I doubt. That down later, too, that night after she went to bed, I called the forensic accountant again. We met at a diner near the old mall. Vinyl booths, burnt coffee. The bell on the door still jingling when you walked in. Didn't sound surprised by anything I told him. This is common, he said, sliding a legal pad toward me. Control often starts with convenience. Then it moves to credibility. Then it questions memory. Swallowed, so I'm not imagining it. No, he said. You're just late to the information. On the drive home, I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and sat there, hands on the wheel. Thought about how many times I'd let myself be placed behind someone else, how easy it was to confuse kindness with surrender. Next day, I went to the public library. I felt ridiculous. At first, squinting at a keyboard, muttering under my breath. A teenager gave me a look like I'd insulted her cat butt. Slowly, with the accountant on the phone, I worked through old email accounts, and there it was. Notifications I'd never seen address. Changes, beneficiary updates, confirmations sent to an inbox I didn't control. I printed everything. Page after page, as the printer whined and spat out proof. Something settled in May. Wasn't angry. I was ready. When I got home, there was an envelope on the counter, an invitation, ethics and leadership awards, dinner, Marianne's name printed in gold script. I held it for a long moment and felt something close to pity, because she still thought this was about image, and I was finally holding the paperwork that could bring it down quietly, one documented step at a time. The invitation sat on the counter for 3 days before I touched it again. Marianne treated it like a crown jewel. She practiced her remarks aloud in the living room, timing pauses, adjusting emphasis. Words like transparency and ethics floated through the house as if saying them often enough made them true. This is important, she told me, smoothing a banner she'd brought home to check for creases. People need to see consistency. I nodded. I always did, but this time something else was already moving. 3 days earlier, the packets had gone out quietly. Precisely through the channels Eleanor had shown my audit committee, outside counsel, a board liaison whose name I didn't recognize but whose questions were exacting. No leaks, no accusations, just dates, documents, policy language that didn't argue back. Facts don't need tanda. Night of the dinner, the hotel near the river glowed like a promise. All glass, all brushed steel, the kind of place that made people feel important just by walking in. Marianne arrived early with a clipboard, heels clicking like a metronome. She hugged donors, laughed at inside jokes, kissed cheeks, Her name appeared on banners beside words like integrity and leadership. I came in 10 minutes late, not because I was nervous because timing matters. I wore a dark jacket and clean boots, not flashy. Not defiant, just May nodded to the valet, thanked the hostess, and took a seat near the back where Marianne always liked me best. From the stage she looked untouchable. She began to speak, the room quieted at a time when trust in institutions is fragile. She said into the microphone, "It's our responsibility as leaders to uphold ethical standards. Even when it's uncomfortable," I felt calm settle over. Meet the kind that comes when the work is already done. Halfway through her remarks, I noticed movement at the head table. A man in a gray suit leaned in to whisper to a woman beside him. Another phone came out, then another. The buzz didn't spread loudly. It spread carefully. Marianne kept talking. Her voice wavered just a fraction. A hand went up near the front. Marianne, a board member said, standing, "May we pause?" She smiled tight. Of course he didn't sit back down. "There are some questions," he said, choosing each word that need to be addressed before we continue. The room shifted, chairs creaked, someone cleared their throat. "This is inappropriate," Marianne said, the smile thinning. "This is a personal matter. No, the board member replied, "It's a compliance matter." The projector behind her flickered to life. Email headers, dates, policy excerpts, mailing changes, beneficiary confirmations, a timeline that didn't shout but didn't blink. Marianne's eyes searched the room for control and found me instead. "This is my husband," she said, sharply pointing. "He's confused." There it was, the word she'd used like a key. Stewed. The sound traveled fabric against chair boots, against carpet heads. Turned. The board member nodded once. "Mr. The invitation sat on the counter for 3 days before I touched it again." Marianne treated it like a crown jewel. She practiced her remarks aloud in the living room, timing pauses, adjusting emphasis. Words like transparency and ethics floated through the house as if saying them often enough made them true. "This is important," she told me, smoothing a banner she'd brought home to check for creases. "People need to see consistency." I nodded. I always did, but this time something else was already moving. 3 days earlier, the packets had gone out quietly. Act. Precisely through the channels Eleanor had shown my audit committee, outside counsel, a board liaison whose name I didn't recognize but whose questions were exacting. No leaks, no accusations, just dates, documents, policy language that didn't argue back. Facts don't need ton. The night of the dinner, the hotel near the river glowed like a promise, all glass, all brushed steel, the kind of place that made people feel important just by walking in. Marianne arrived early, with a clipboard, heels clicking like a metronome. She hugged donors, laughed at inside jokes, kissed cheeks. Her name appeared on banners beside words like integrity and leadership. I came in 10 minutes late, not because I was nervous because timing matters. I wore a dark jacket and clean boots, not flashy. Not defiant, just May nodded to the valet, thanked the hostess, and took a seat near the back where Marianne always liked me best. From the stage she looked untouchable. She began to speak, the room quieted at a time when trust in institutions is fragile. She said into the microphone, "It's our responsibility as leaders to uphold ethical standards. Even when it's uncomfortable," I felt calm settle over. Meet the kind that comes when the work is already done. Halfway through her remarks, I noticed movement at the head table. A man in a gray suit leaned in to whisper to a woman beside him. Another phone came out, then another. The buzz didn't spread loudly. It spread carefully. Marianne kept talking. Her voice wavered just a fraction. A hand went up near the front. Marianne, a board member said, standing, "May we pause?" She smiled tight. Of course he didn't sit back down. "There are some questions," he said, choosing each word that need to be addressed before we continue. The room shifted, chairs creaked, someone cleared their throat. "This is inappropriate," Marianne said, the smile thinning. "This is a personal matter." "No," the board member replied, "It's a compliance matter." The projector behind her flickered to life. Email headers, dates, policy excerpts, mailing changes, beneficiary confirmations, a timeline that didn't shout but didn't blink. Marianne's eyes searched the room for control and found me instead. "This is my husband," she said, sharply pointing. "He's confused." There it was, the word she'd used like a key. Stewed. The Sound traveled fabric against chair boots, against carpet heads, turned the board member. Nodded once. Mr. Keller has provided documentation, he said. Substantial documentation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I'm not confused, I said. I'm informed. Silence fell hard. Marianne's hand shook the glass of water on the lectern. Tipped and shattered on the stage, no one moved to help them. Board member thanked the attendees for their patience and announced a temporary suspension. Pending review, Marianne was escorted off stage, her heels clicking out of rhythm for the first time. I'd ever heard I stayed where I was because when integrity finally shows up, it doesn't ask permission, asks for daylight, and that room learned the difference.